Okay, so how's everybody doing? Everybody staying warm today? Really cold, isn't it? It's 24 degrees out there. I haven't even been outside except for to walk in the building this morning. I'm trying not to go out there. There was also a handout at the front, so make sure you got one of those. This one's going to be a little shorter today. Something came up that I've got to get to this afternoon. So we are going to be going over some interviewing, and this is not a basic interviewing workshop. We're going to be going into some questions and just kind of talking about how to navigate those questions and how to prepare. If you need help with basic interviewing techniques, then I want to direct you to our YouTube channel. And if you want to go search Rawls Career Management Center. Thought I had it up. Sorry, I'm having issues today, obviously. There we go. If you go to YouTube and search Rawls Career Management Center, that's going to take you to our YouTube page, our YouTube channel. And if you put interviewing in as a keyword, then we've got some interviewing basics workshop, and then also telephone and virtual interviewing. So you could go back and review those videos to help you with more of the just basic interview prep. We can also help you in the Career Management Center, as one of the appointment types in there is interview prep. So that's going to be getting you ready for a specific interview that you have coming up, or maybe you just have more questions about interviewing that you can get help with. And also inside Handshake is an interview type called mock interview, where you can do a practice interview as well. So let's see here. We're going to talk about some ways that you can prepare and different resources that you can use to help prepare yourself besides making an appointment in the Career Management Center. I want to show you a little place on LinkedIn. Okay, so if you log into your LinkedIn profile, and then if you click on the Jobs tab, and then go over here to My Jobs. And over here at the right, it's kind of hard to see, like you probably wouldn't have noticed it if I didn't show you this, but over here to the right, if you click on See All Questions, LinkedIn has this built-in interview prep. So this one is the top 26 common questions, but you can also click on categories and you can change the categories here, and it changes the questions. But these top 26 right here, they're really good. I've gone through all 26 of them. I think they're a great way for you to interview prep. Of course, we would love for you to come in and let us help you in our office. But let's say that you get scheduled for an interview and you don't have a lot of time. Then this would be a great way for you to prep. If you click on the question and then you go over here to the right, you've got to scroll all the way down for the free stuff, because LinkedIn's always trying to get you to buy premium, right? Well, you don't need to buy premium. So if you scroll all the way down, then right here, it gives you, explains the interview question and then gives you some tips on how to answer that question. And I've gone through all 26 of those, and I think it's fantastic advice. So I just wanted to show you that as a resource for preparing. And then also, the CMC handbook. So I did bring a few of these. We have more of these in our office. But if you don't have a copy of our handbook, then you can grab one of these or go into our office right up here with 119. This is like a career coach in a book, okay? There's all kinds of great advice in here, but there's a whole page on interviewing. I believe it's page 35, and it gives you sample interview questions, sample behavioral style questions, and also questions to ask the person that's interviewing you. So this is a great way to prepare as well. You are going to see some of these questions repeated, but I'm just showing all the different resources on how you can prepare. So this is also one way. Okay. And then also we have a software that we use in our office called Quinsia. And it's an artificial intelligence mock interview software. So it's another option. Let's say you do get scheduled for an interview and you're running out of time. You don't have time to come do a mock interview in the CMC. Then you can get on Quinsia and you can do a mock interview any time of day from anywhere. Okay. What you have to do though, and I'll give you my email at the end. You have to email us and then say, I would like access to Quinsia to do a mock interview, and we add you to the system, and then it sends you an invitation, and you can just continue to use that for mock interview practice. Okay. All right. And then the next thing I want to show you is using ChatGPT to help you with your interviewing. Or any other generative AI that you want to use. Okay, I already have this in here for just to save time. But what I've done is I have gone into Handshake and I have found a job. And I took this is literally how I did it. I took my mouse and I highlighted that job description. And this could be from any website, okay? But I did find it in Handshake. It's a job with JP Morgan Chase. Highlighted the entire job description and hit copy. Then I go into ChatGPT and I give it my little prompt, okay? I'm a college junior finance major. I'm interviewing with the following company. Based on this job description, please give me 20 possible interview questions to prepare for, including advice on how to answer each question. And then you click enter and then paste. And you can see here how I've pasted that entire job description. And then it goes to work and it does all this fancy stuff for you. And it's given me 20 possible interview questions for this role based off of that job description, okay? Fantastic way to prepare. And I don't think this should be your only way to prepare, but I think it could be a tool in your toolbox. So if you kind of go down, you can see it gives you some behavioral and fit questions, some technology and industry specific questions, situation and problem solving type questions. And then it gives you information on, okay, how do I go about answering that question? Which is kind of what we're going to do today on some of these other questions. But I just wanted you to show you that as a resource for a way to use ChatGPT to prepare. I'm gonna log out of that real quick so nobody gets in and messes with my ChatGPT, and I'm gonna log out of this so nobody messes with my LinkedIn profile. Okay. Okay, so let's get into some of the common questions. We are not going to do a role play today, but I highly recommend that you find a friend that you can practice engaging with on answering these questions. What I've given you today is the handout so you can take notes on, you know, what about the question? What is it? Why are they asking this question? What are kind of some tricks to use to kind of answer those? So we're going to get into those. Okay, so the first one is tell me about yourself. It's not really a question, but it is very much a very common way for interviewers to start an interview. How many of you have had an interview start with tell me about yourself? Okay, very common. One of the reasons they do it is because it's kind of like it's an icebreaker in a way. If you sat down at an interview and they said, tell me about a time you solved a significant problem, that'd be weird, right? Like they're not going to jump right into those hard questions. So tell me about yourself gives you a chance for them to get to know you a little bit, but also starts it off in a conversational type like tone, because you want the tone of your interview to be conversational. You don't want to sit there feeling like you're a robot under a spotlight, like answering questions that you've rehearsed all these, you know, amazing answers for. Interviews are not supposed to be like that, but if no one's ever told you that, then you wouldn't know. It really should be a conversation. I always tell students to pretend like you're sitting and having coffee with someone and getting to know them. And when you do that, that kind of takes the pressure off of I'm being questioned, okay? Because when you think of it as a questioning like that, then you're automatically getting more anxiety and feeling nervous about it. So think of it as I'm sitting here having coffee with this person. They're trying to get to know me. I'm trying to get to know them to see if I'm a fit for this role. Okay, so go into your interviews like that. And when they start off with tell me about yourself, it's not a time for you to tell them your entire life story, okay? It should be fairly short. So we're talking about a couple of minutes of you talking. I'm not even lying. I was in an interview a few years ago in here for a role like in this building. I was asked to be on this hiring committee. And these people are professionals. They've already been in the workforce for several years. And it was kind of a higher level position too. And they started with that. They talked, I'm not even kidding, they talked for 30 minutes without stopping. And we were all going, when are they going to stop? I'm not kidding. So people don't know. People don't realize that it's just meant for a brief introduction. But things that I want you to be able to share are, tell them a little bit about yourself. Tell them where you're from. Tell them maybe where you grew up. Then you're gonna talk a little bit about the past. Okay, so and when I mean the past, maybe, you know, some of my first jobs that I ever had were this, and this, or I've been working since I was 15 or 16 and mainly jobs, you know, in the service industry, or, you know, you're touching briefly on those things. And then you start talking about the present. So think of past, present, future. So what are you doing now? What are you currently involved in? What are your hobbies? Where are you spending your time? What kind of work are you doing? What kind of student orgs are you involved in? And then you're going to talk about the future. So where are you headed? What are you looking for? Why are you sitting there, you know, doing an interview for this job? You can go ahead and throw in some things like your strengths, interests, things like that if you want to. I do think it's starting off really strong if you can automatically, in that introduction, start displaying your skills and your best qualities. But you have to be really smooth, okay? You have to be really smooth and not sound robotic. So if you're able to do that without sounding rehearsed and robotic, then fantastic, go for it. And again, keeping your answer concise. We're not talking about a 30-minute monologue, okay? So this says 3 to 5 minutes. I'm thinking more like 3, something like, you're not timing yourself, but in your mind, you're keeping, you know, staying on target, okay? Any questions about that one? No, not necessarily, but I don't think you probably wouldn't be able to tell them a whole lot in a minute. You know, I would say, if you're expanding a little bit more on your experiences in the past and your current experiences, then it's going to take longer than that. I would think, yeah. Any other questions about this first question? It's not a question, but how to start off the interview. Okay. Sorry about my technical difficulties, but I can't run my PowerPoint the right way. Okay, next, it's very common for them to ask you, why did you apply? Why did you apply for this job? So in this instance, this is a chance for you to show that you do understand a little bit about the company. Okay, so you're not expected to fully understand the company when you're coming in for an interview, because some companies are really large and really involved, and you don't have time to do that. But you do need to have a general understanding of who you're interviewing with. I can't tell you that how many times I've talked to a student and they're going in an interview and they don't even know who the company is. Okay, that's not going to go off well. So they expect you to have a general understanding, and you're going to have to just go to the company website to do that type of research, right? So you're showing them, I know who you are. This is why I'm interested. If you can align yourself with any of the company's missions, values, core values, mission statements, something like that, that always looks good. Most companies on their website, you will find a section that's called usually about or about us. It's either going to be, it's usually going to be at the top, okay? And however they have their website set up, some sort of menu, drop down menu, you're going to go there first, because right away, that's where they're going to start talking about, this is who we are and this is what matters to us. Okay. What you're trying to do is you're trying to show this company, I like who you are, I like what you value, and I also value those same things. And you're trying to display that when they're saying, why did you apply for this job? So that's you aligning yourself with the company, but you also have to try to align yourself with the role. So you're trying to show, you know, I read this job description and I thought this sounds exactly like something I want to do. Okay, things like that. You're showing excitement, energy, enthusiasm, positivity, and you're starting to paint a picture for them that you see yourself in this role. Okay, when you do that, they're going to start seeing you in the role as well. Okay, so this is how it's all starting from the very beginning. Any questions about that one? Okay. What sets you apart from other candidates? Most students struggle with this, okay? So let's talk about, in general, a business student. What qualities do business students have? Just start naming out adjectives. Out loud. Ambitious. Ambitious. What else? Great communication. What else?
Diligent. Sorry, diligent.
They're diligent, yes. Organized.
Studious.
Studious. What else? Okay, you get the idea. These are the things that they already know about you. Those are not your strengths. They are strengths, but they're not the strengths that they want to hear, because guess what? Everybody else that they interview for the same role has those strengths as well. You wouldn't be here if you didn't have those strengths. Those are strengths and skills necessary to be a successful business major, okay? So you're bypassing what we call those buzzwords. You need to focus on your top strengths and abilities. What makes you unique? What is your value proposition? What value are you bringing to the table to this employer? And what the reason this is hard is because first you're going to think about all those things we just said. Those are your first thoughts about yourself because those are true. But you've got to dig deeper and find out, what are my intrinsic strengths that I just naturally have that would make me a good employee for this company or make me a good fit for this role? So if you haven't done any self-exploration, you need to do this before interview. And I highly suggest you dig up your Strengths Quest top 5 talent themes that you took the assessment MBA 1301. You can still access those through the Texas Tech website. Just Google Texas Tech Strengths Quest, sign in with your E-Rater, and your results are still there. If you've never taken it yet, if you're in 1301, it's an assignment right now, okay? If you have been in 1301, it was already an assignment. Dig that out, okay? And I want you to focus on those top 5 strengths because those are unique to you, and you can build stories and build a language to be able to talk about how those are strengths and how you can use those in a role, all right? Another way you can do this is to take an assessment such as 16 Personalities. It's free online. It's the number 16personalities.com. Love, love, love that assessment. Because not only is it going to give you your personality style, but it will go into strengths, but it also will talk about, it'll hit on your weaknesses as well. Okay, so I love those for you to figure out what do I bring to the table besides being a great business student, all right? Be able to highlight something unique about yourself. One way to do this is to ask close family members and friends, other than an assessment. Ask your family and friends, say, what would you say is the thing I'm best at? It's also fun, to ask them. And I can guarantee you one thing, your parents are going to be the ones that see your strengths faster than anybody else because they've seen you be good at these things your entire life. So they're going to be like, oh, that's easy. You're good at this or you're good at that. Okay. But it needs to be things that you could use in a job. You may be great at juggling, but that's not going to help you much in the workplace. Okay. So if you're good at juggling, you're probably really good at eye-hand coordination, okay? So some of those things that you're like, oh, well, that doesn't matter. I can't use it in the workplace. Think about it a little bit more and see if you can, right? Now, some of you may have a distinct set of technical skills or training that other students may not have. Then you can definitely talk about those as your strength. Sometimes you've been in circumstances, situations, experiences where you have built certain skills that other students may not have, okay? So that you can bring those up as well. Any questions about this one?
For the technical training, it should be specific to whatever job or.
Maybe. So the technical training, it may be specific to the role, but it may be something more general, but still technical, such as you're in Excel, you're really good at Excel or something like that. Because I know, like, as a business student, you use Excel in some of your classes, but some people just love Excel and they've taken like multiple certifications for that stuff like that. Okay. Sometimes this will come in handy for IT students because IT students may have extra certifications in certain things that they're just interested in. So they go and do the education on their own and get some extra education or certification. Sometimes it applies there. Okay, how to deal with pressure or stress. How do you deal with pressure or stressful situations? So here you're wanting to talk about ways that, okay, when I'm under pressure, how do I handle it? What do I do? Maybe you say, I usually will just take a step back, take some deep breaths, count to 10, try to refocus, things like that. What you want to stay away from is you got to be careful with questions like this because sometimes these questions can lead to you revealing things in an interview that you should not reveal. Okay, so let's say you have anxiety. You're not going to reveal that in an interview. It might be true, but you don't have to tell them that, okay? So if you do get anxious under pressure, then you're not going to tell them that. But you can talk about ways that you cope with that, okay? So these are the things I do to handle being under pressure, right? Or maybe you're ADHD or you have other medical diagnoses. You're never going to bring any of those up in an interview. They can't use any of that in the hiring decision, so they don't want to hear about it, okay? So you never want to bring anything like that up. You could even share an instance when you remained calm despite the turmoil and the chaos around you. If you've been in any kind of part-time role, think about, okay, there was a time when things got crazy and this is how I handled it. Always making yourself sound like you can handle a little bit of pressure, okay? And you can handle a little bit of stress. I would say one thing that applies to all of you would be handling your course load as a business student. But, you know, have you ever had a semester where you had to take 18 hours instead of 15 hours? How did you manage your time? How did you make that happen? Maybe you're a student who works almost full time and goes to school full time. There's a lot of students that have to do that. Well, that can get pretty stressful. So how do you handle that? Okay, so this is what they're looking for. They're looking for that you have the ability to handle a little bit of stress and pressure. Okay, that's the motivation behind that question. A lot of times when you're looking at an interview question and thinking, how am I going to answer this? Ask yourself, why are they asking me this? What's the motivation behind asking me about how I handle pressure and stress? From their perspective, why would they want to know how I do that? Okay, so put yourself in their shoes, and sometimes that will help you formulate your answer to the interview questions. All right, let's scroll down a little bit, see where we're at here. Okay, now this one, I could have put this at the beginning, but you need to be prepared for what we call behavioral style questions. And typically what you're going to see is you're going to see them surrounding these skills here. These are what we call our top competencies or soft skills or transferable skills. These are skills they're expecting you to come into these roles having. They're expecting you to have built these skills in your part-time work, your student involvement, your work while you were in high school, okay? They expect you to come into internships with these skills and full-time roles with these skills. If I tasked you with going on the internet or wherever, and I said, bring me 20 job descriptions of any job, 20 different job descriptions, I guarantee you these skills are going to be on there, okay? So if you know that they're expecting you to have these, you know these questions are coming in an interview. So what I want you to do for prep work for your interviews is I want you to use the STAR method, which is a technique for answering an interview question with enough information to allow the interviewer to believe you actually have that experience or that skill, okay? It's an acronym that stands for situation, task, action, result. So when you're answering the question, you're using these pieces to tell a story. So you're going to give them a little bit of information about what was going on for context, okay? What was happening? What did you need to do? What did you do? What was the outcome? What did you learn? Okay, so you're painting a picture for them. Remember, when you're using the STAR method, you need to stay concise. Give them just enough information for context. Don't ramble and don't get in the weeds on too many details that they really don't need. Give them just enough details to understand what's going on. But preparing for interviews, if you want to go ahead and take these 5 and come up with your 2 best examples, spread out through all your experiences you've had so far, you're ready because it's coming and you're going to use this for any interview. So when you're preparing specifically with a job description for a role, I mean, that's going to happen. You're going to have to do that. You're going to have to do some specific prep work, but all you got to do is do this once, because you're going to use this and you transfer this to all of your interviews, okay? Now, as time goes by, your answers may change because you will have new experiences to draw from. but you know it's coming, so go ahead and choose your top 2 stories using the STAR method for these areas here.
You use the STAR method for all of them.
Yeah, you would use the STAR method to answer the majority of interview questions. There's a few times when you don't have to actually use the STAR method. For instance, when you're talking about a weakness, which we're going to get to. And sometimes the answer is just a simple yes or no. It's not a, let me give you a story of why it's no, or you know what I'm saying? So sometimes it doesn't apply. But when they're asking about a specific experience or skill, you should use it. Yeah. Okay, any questions, any other questions about this one? All right. All right, what's the hardest problem you've ever tackled? Tell me about a challenge you've had to overcome. Tell me about a significant problem you've solved. It could be worded different ways, okay? Okay, let's go back to what's the motivation behind the question? Why would they ask you this? Any guesses?
You know how you felt with it?
Yeah. So first of all, they're wanting to see, have you ever had to do anything hard? And how did you deal with it? How do you problem solve? What steps do you take to problem solve? When you're faced with something difficult, how do you react? Do you throw your hands in the air and give up? Have you had times in your life where you got knocked down and you had to get up and keep going? That's called grit. That's called tenacity. Employers want people who have grit and tenacity. Because if you have never had to challenge yourself or do anything hard, are you going to be a very good employee? No. You're going to be a little whiny baby, or every time things get hard, you're going to go to your supervisor and go, I can't do this, or how do you do this, or I need help. Typically, business students are not going to be that way, but that's why they ask you these questions, because they want to see what's some hard stuff you've done, okay? And honestly, being a business student is hard in itself because your classes are challenging. It doesn't matter what your major is for business, it's a challenging field. So, you know, if you haven't ever had any other experiences that you think you could talk about some tough group projects you've had, or a class that was really challenging to you and how you rose to the occasion and passed the class, things like that, okay? All right. All right, so the dreaded weakness question. They're going to ask about strengths, but then they're probably going to, the very next question is probably going to be, tell me about a weakness of yours, okay? So there's a couple of ways to tackle this. You want to think about ahead of time what this is going to be, because you don't want to be caught off guard with this question, because you're going to be like, no one likes to talk about a weakness. So go ahead and have this ready. Have it in your arsenal. You already know what your answer you're going to use for this question. Pick something that is an actual weakness that you have recognized is something you could be better at, and then you're going to tell them a little bit how you're working on that and how you have worked on it, how you have improved. Okay. The things you want to stay away from, again, are anything giving them any kind of too much information. No personal problems, no medical diagnosis, nothing that's you don't want to choose something that's going to make you not a good candidate for that role, okay? So let's say that this is a role for a client-facing customer sales liaison for a software company. Let's say you have trouble presenting information to people. That might be true, but you're not going to tell them that, because that's going to make you not a good candidate for that role, because you're going to be doing software demonstration. Okay. You see what I'm saying? So that's an example of try to choose a weakness that isn't going to be a core skill needed for that role. All right. Okay. Any questions about that one? That one's going to take some thought on your part to kind of think through and decide what you want to actually use for that. And if you're not sure if you've chosen a good one, come talk to us in the CMC and we can help you work through that. Okay. Sometimes it's an okay weakness to use. You just need us to kind of help you develop that language around it. All right, tell me about a time you worked with someone in a difficult situation. How did you handle the conflict? This is another one that could possibly be a trick question, okay? They really do want to see that you have the ability to handle conflict or tough situations. So they want to hear about it, but you got to be careful. Some people can be harboring some feelings and feeling some type of way about something that happened in a certain situation. And they ask you this and you're like, this is my chance to get validation. Okay, I was wrong. It's not the time to do that, right? So you kind of have to just put that aside. And when you're describing these type situations, we're talking about conflict, okay? So usually conflict also involves emotion. So when you are telling these stories, first of all, you got to stay concise and stick to the story. We're not going to get in the weeds of, and I did this, and then she did this, and then I said, and then she said, and you're telling, like, no. They're going to be like, get to the point, okay? So give enough information for context, but the point that they want to see is what was the conflict? How did you resolve it? What did you learn? All right. So you're sticking to the story, but you're still allowing them to see that you've had a chance to handle conflict. Okay. And you should all have experiences with this. This could be in your part-time role, student involvement, a roommate situation. You just want to be careful when you're talking about personal stories. Okay. You don't want to get too personal, for sure. Any questions about that one?
In development world, it doesn't work with someone that you work with.
It doesn't have to be someone that you've worked with, but what they're wanting to see is, can you handle conflict in the workplace or with a customer? Okay. So you can try to pick a story that's at least close relevant to that. If it's like just interpersonal conflict, you know, you just don't want to get into too many details of the personal part, okay? If you can choose a work-related one or school-related one or student involvement-related one, that's going to be better. Yeah. Okay. And I don't think I mentioned this, but here, with questions like this, it allows you to show them that you have effective communication skills. All right. So this is giving you the chance to show how you communicate clearly, how you can use empathy with others, and how you can resolve it. All right. So that's kind of all built into why would they ask me this question. All right. And then a lot of times at the end, they'll say, why should we hire you? And you're like, oh, I just spent 30 minutes trying to sell myself, but now I got to tell you, no. So at this point, this is time for you to mention anything that maybe you didn't get a chance to talk about in the interview. And as you were preparing, you had things in mind, but they didn't, for whatever reason, they didn't come up. Well, this is a chance for you to bring those up and say, you know, we didn't get to talk about this certain experience or achievement or challenge or whatever, where, you know, you can shine, bring it up and say, I just wanted to share a little bit about this with you. Okay, that's great. Or at this point, if you feel like everything was covered sufficiently, then you can then tell them, you can reiterate why you think you're a fit. Because at the end of the interview, hopefully you've gotten more information about the actual role that you're interviewing for. Maybe your excitement has built even more because you're like, yeah, I am excited about this. I think I see myself really fitting in here, okay? So reiterate all of that at the end. So at the end, you're like, you know, I'm your gal, I'm your guy, you know, you're telling them this. Also, if you want the job, you need to have been conveying that enthusiasm. And if you don't feel like you have throughout the interview, then you need to at the end. I've talked to multiple recruiters that tell me they've been in interviews with students and they're sitting there the whole time thinking, do you want this job? And to me, that's crazy because like you should be showing excitement about whether you want the job. And there are times when you will be in interviews and you might be thinking to yourself, I'm not really sure this is a fit for me. That's fine. That's valid. I would say don't mention that. Okay. But you don't have to fake your excitement either. I would say just, you know, go through the interview. Always try for the offer, and you can turn the offer down if you want to, right? But if you are super excited and jazzed and you want the job, you need to tell them, you need to let them know. I've been in interviews where I'm sitting there looking at the person going, do you even want this job? Like, that's crazy to me. They weren't smiling, they weren't excited, they had no energy, okay? And I wasn't gonna give it to them anyway, but I was curious, like, do you even want this job? So you gotta let all of that shine through. Using that as a chance to just reiterate, go ahead and, aligning yourself again with the company, something like that. Trying to end on a positive note, okay? And then after the end, and typically they will end like this, they'll say, do you have any questions for us? And you do need to have questions ready for them, okay? This is something we cover in our basic interviewing workshops, but you should always have questions at the end of the interview ready. I tell my students to go ahead and write, as you're preparing for the interview, write those down in your Padfolio or whatever you're going to take into the interview with you, because you're going to forget your question, okay? So I would say prepare 3 to 5 questions to ask at the end of the interview. You don't want to take up too much of their time at the end. And I would say 3-ish questions is appropriate, 3 to 4, but you're not turning it into a 30 to 45 minute of you interviewing them. Okay, it's just time for a few questions. If you're not sure what are good questions, there's some resources in the handbook there. You can also use ChatGPT. And I mean, you can Google it, okay, to come up with some intelligent, thoughtful questions that show your genuine interest in the company or the role. So always end with those great questions, okay? So also wanted to go ahead and flash our, this is my email address. And then also Kaylee Holden, who is a career coach in our office, or Dennis, if you've been communicating with Dennis. If you will let us know you want to be, to use Quincia, that has to be by invitation only. So you would email us and let us know that you want to use Quincia, and I can get that set up for you, okay? All right, well, hopefully that was helpful. Again, I do want to reiterate, if you have not been to a basic interviewing workshop where they talk about the basics of how you present, introductions, how you shake hands, what time do you show up, what do you wear, all those things, please go to YouTube and watch a video there, because I don't want you to miss out on that either. All right? Okay, thank y'all for coming, and I'll hang out if anybody has questions later.